The great council chamber of the Galactic Concord had stood for 60,000 years. Its walls were made of crystal harvested from dying stars. Its floor was polished stone from a world that no longer existed. 12 species had built this place together, and for all those thousands of years, they had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy from these ancient seats. When humanity arrived, the council members looked upon them with curiosity and mild amusement. Ambassador Oran of the Dominion was the first to speak. His body was tall and thin, covered in silver scales that shifted color with his emotions. He had lived for 300 years and had seen many young species come before the council. Humans, he decided quickly, were nothing special. "They are small," he said to his colleagues during a private meeting. "Their bodies are fragile. They cannot survive in vacuum. They cannot breathe underwater. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armor. Their minds cannot touch the psionic currents, and their civilization has only traveled among the stars for 300 years. The other council members agreed. The who were ancient beings of living metal noted that human ships were primitive. The Etherian Collective, whose members existed as clouds of intelligent gas, found human thought patterns simple and predictable. The hegemony, massive warriors with armored shells, laughed at the idea that such soft creatures could ever matter in galactic affairs. So the council made its decision. Humanity would receive one vote, the minimum given to any recognized species. They would be assigned to the fringe territories, a strip of space at the edge of conquered control. It was a buffer zone, a place that would be sacrificed first if the horde ever came. Nobody expected humans to complain. Nobody expected them to matter. Ambassador Sarah accepted the council's decision with a polite smile. She thanked them for their consideration. She asked if humanity might have access to the Concord's historical archives to learn from the wisdom of elder species. The request was. She asked if human engineers might study at Concord shipyards to improve their primitive vessels. The request was. She asked if human officers might train at Concord military academies to better defend their assigned territory. The request was. Each time, Ambassador simply nodded and said she understood. Each time, she returned to her ship and sent a detailed report back to Earth. The elder species did not know that every denial taught humanity something valuable. Each refusal revealed what the conquered wanted to protect. Each rejection showed where their advantages lay. 40 years passed. During those 4 decades, humanity did exactly what the Council expected. They traded goods. They transported cargo. Their merchant ships traveled through conquered space carrying materials and products between worlds. Human workers took jobs that other species considered beneath them. Human scientists asked endless questions that elder researchers found tedious and basic. The thought humans were trying to catch up. The thought humans were accepting their place. The thought humans had given up on becoming anything important. None of them noticed the patterns. Human merchant vessels always took longer routes than necessary. They passed by military installations and fleet staging areas. They lingered near shipyards and weapons testing facilities. Every ship carried hidden sensor arrays buried deep in their cargo holds. Every crew member had been trained to observe and remember. Human diplomats attended every public function they were invited to. They listened to conversations. They noted which species feared which threats. They learned which admirals were cautious and which were bold. They mapped the political relationships between council members. Human scientists asked basic questions because basic answers revealed fundamental principles. They requested access to public databases and studied everything available. When they found gaps in the public knowledge, they knew those gaps contained secrets worth learning. And back in the Sol system, far from any conquered observers, something else was happening. The shipyards that conquered inspectors were allowed to visit produced exactly what humanity had reported. 18 destroyers and 43 frigates over 40 years. A pitiful fleet. A joke compared to the millions of vessels the elder species controlled. But those were not humanity's only shipyards. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden facilities worked around the clock. In the cold darkness beyond Neptune, construction platforms assembled hulls larger than anything the Conquered had ever built. In the empty void between Sol and Alpha, engines of war took shape in absolute secrecy. Human engineers had studied every piece of Conquered technology they could access. They had reverse-engineered what they found. They had improved it. They had combined ideas from 12 different species with human innovation and human determination. The elder races believed that advanced technology required thousands of years to develop. They were right, if a species worked alone. But humanity had never intended to work alone. They had stolen knowledge from everyone, learned from everyone, and built something new. Admiral Helena commanded Earth's official fleet, the 18 destroyers and 43 frigates that the Conquered knew about. She attended military conferences where elder officers spoke to her slowly and used simple words, as if she were a child. She smiled and thanked them for their patience. In private, she reviewed reports from the hidden shipyards. She watched the numbers climb: 100 vessels, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Her grandfather had been alive when humanity made first contact. He had told her stories about that day, the wonder and the hope that Earth had felt when they learned they were not alone in the universe. He had also told her about the disappointment that followed, the dismissal, the condescension, the slow realization that the galaxy's elder races saw humanity as nothing more than insects. "They will learn," her grandfather had said before he died. "One day they will learn what humans can do when we are told we cannot." Admiral kept those words close to her heart as the years passed, and the hidden fleet grew larger. The Conquered continued to ignore humanity. Ambassador Oran occasionally checked on the small species assigned to the fringe territories. He found them exactly as expected, quiet, obedient, and unremarkable. He felt a small amount of pity for them. When the horde eventually came, humans would be the first to die. It was unfortunate, but such was the nature of the galaxy. The weak did not survive. What Oran did not understand, what none of the elder species understood, was that humanity had never been weak. They had simply been waiting. In the darkness beyond the edge of known space, 1,000,000 warships sat in perfect silence, ready for the day when waiting would end. That day was coming soon. The horde had known. They had consumed it long ago, along with every other planet in their original system. Now they existed only to expand, to feed, to grow. Their ships were not built. They were grown from organic material harvested from the worlds they devoured. Their crews were not trained. They were born with the knowledge of war written into their genes. 11 civilizations had fallen to the horde across 3 galactic arms. They did not conquer. They did not enslave. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next meal. The Galactic Conquered had known about them for centuries. Their analysts had calculated the horde's trajectory and determined that it would reach conquered space in approximately 200 years. Plenty of time to prepare. Plenty of time to build defenses. The analysts were wrong. They arrived at the periphery on a cold morning in the Conquered calendar. Their fleet numbered 900 million vessels, a tide of black chitin and burning plasma that blocked out the stars themselves. They did not announce their presence. They did not demand surrender. They simply began to feed. The fringe territories fell in 11 days. Colony worlds that had existed for thousands of years were stripped to bare rock. Orbital stations were torn apart and processed into fuel. 32 billion sentient beings died in the first week alone. Their screams for help echoed across every communication channel in the galaxy. The Galactic Conquered called an emergency session. Ambassador Oran stood before the council, his silver scales pale with stress. The situation was worse than anyone had predicted. They were not just numerous, they were fast. Their organic ships could repair themselves during battle. Their warriors felt no fear and no pain, and they were heading directly toward the heart of conquered space. "We must consolidate our forces," the representative declared, his metal body humming with tension. "Pull back to the inner systems. Establish a defensive line at the nebula." "That would mean abandoning the fringe territories entirely," the Etherian collective noted. "Billions more will die." "Billions will die regardless," Oran said grimly. "The question is whether we sacrifice the few to save the many, or lose everything by trying to protect what cannot be protected." The council voted. 10 species supported the retreat, 2 abstained, none voted against. Earth lay directly in this path. Humanity would be left to face the horde alone. Admiral Helena received the news in the Concord's military command center. She stood among officers from a dozen species, all of them carefully avoiding her gaze. Some felt guilt, others felt nothing at all. Humans were a minor species. Their loss was unfortunate but acceptable. Ambassador Oran approached her personally. It was, he felt, the least he could do. "Admiral," he said, his voice carrying what he hoped was appropriate sympathy, "I want you to know that this decision was not made lightly. The Council recognizes humanity's courage. Your species showed great promise. History will remember your sacrifice." Listened in silence. Her face showed no emotion. When Oran finished speaking, she did not thank him. She did not protest. She simply looked at him with eyes that held something the ambassador could not identify. "The Concord's assistance will not be necessary," she said. Oran's scales flickered with confusion. "Admiral, I do not think you understand the situation. The fleet numbers 900 million vessels. Your registered military force consists of 18 destroyers and 43 frigates. Mathematics alone. Those are the ships we let you count." The words hung in the air. Around them, officers from other species paused their conversations. Something in its tone had changed. The politeness was gone. The careful deference that humans had shown for 40 years had vanished like morning fog. Oran's membranes flushed with what humans had learned to recognize as pity. He had seen this before in other doomed species. Denial, false hope, the desperate belief that somehow they would survive what could not be survived. "Admiral," he said gently, "I understand that this is difficult to accept, but that cannot be stopped by wishful thinking. Perhaps some of your people can be evacuated. I could speak to the Council about refugee status." Ambassador Oran's voice cut through his words like a blade. "In approximately 6 hours, the Terran Dominion Navy will begin combat operations against the Horde. We will be crossing conquered space to reach the engagement zone. This is not a request for permission. This is a notification." She turned and walked toward the exit. Every eye in the command center followed her. Oran found his voice. "The Terran Dominion Navy, you have no such organization, our records show." "Your records show what we wanted you to see," stopped at the door and looked back. Her smile was small and cold. "You spent 40 years treating us like children. Did you really think we were doing nothing with that time?" She left without another word. Oran stood frozen in place. Around him, the command center had gone completely silent. Officers exchanged confused glances. Some checked their data terminals, searching for information about this Terran Dominion Navy that no intelligence report had ever mentioned. They found nothing. 3 hours later, the first gravitational anomaly was detected at the edge of conquered space. Sensor stations reported massive disturbances. Something huge was moving through regions that had been declared empty for 10,000 years. The void had always been avoided by spacefaring species. It was a lightless expanse filled with asteroid fields and radiation storms. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. Nothing except, apparently, the largest military shipyards the galaxy had ever seen. Communications officers across the Concord began receiving the same message on every frequency in every known language. The voice was human. The tone was calm. The words changed everything. This is Grand Admiral Way of the Terran Dominion Navy. All Concord vessels are advised to maintain current positions. Do not interfere with fleet operations. Repeat, do not interfere. Ambassador Oran rushed to the nearest observation deck. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his very long life. Ships were emerging from the void. Human ships, warships of a size and design that no Concord database had ever recorded. They came in waves, 100,000 vessels in the first wave alone, then another wave, and another. The ambassador watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed what 40 years of patience had built. The galaxy would never be the same. Every species in the galaxy with faster-than-light communication detected it at the same moment. A massive gravitational ripple spread outward from the void like a stone thrown into still water. Sensor networks that had operated flawlessly suddenly struggled to process what they were seeing. On the conquered capital world, technicians stared at their screens in disbelief. On command vessels, organic computers twitched with something that might have been confusion. On distant colony worlds far from the coming battle, ordinary citizens stopped what they were doing and looked toward the sky, as if they could somehow see what was happening light years away. The first wave of ships emerged from hidden jump points scattered throughout the void. 100,000 vessels, each one measuring 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, built from alloys that conquered scientists could not identify. Weapon systems covered every surface, arranged in patterns that matched no known military doctrine. And on each hull, painted in white letters large enough to read from orbit, were the words, Terran Naval Force First Fleet. Admiral Iran watched from his diplomatic vessel as the ships took formation. His scales had gone completely white, a response to extreme shock. Beside him, aides and officers spoke in rapid, frightened voices, but he could not hear them. His entire attention was focused on the massive warships that continued to pour from the void. "How is this possible?" someone asked. "Our sensors sweep that region every cycle. There was nothing there." There had been something there. For 38 years, human construction crews had worked in absolute secrecy. They had hollowed out asteroids and built shipyards inside them. They had used the void's natural radiation to mask their energy signatures. They had constructed a fleet larger than any single species in the Conquered possessed, and no one had suspected a thing. The second wave emerged. Another 100,000 ships, these designated Second Fleet. Then the third wave. Then the fourth. Each fleet was identical in size, 100,000 dreadnoughts, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. Hours passed, the emergence continued. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the live sensor feeds being broadcast on every news channel. That had been the greatest terror the galaxy had known. 900 million vessels, an unstoppable tide of destruction. But now something else was filling the void, something that made even the Horde seem small. When the 10th Fleet emerged, the Conquered Council called another emergency session. This time, no one spoke of abandoning humanity. This time, the elder species sat in stunned silence as their military analysts presented impossible numbers. Current count stands at 1,047,000 vessels, the representative reported, his metallic voice unusually quiet. All of Dreadnought class or higher. Estimated combined firepower exceeds the entire Conquered military by a factor of 3. This cannot be accurate, an Etherian delegate protested. Humans have been spacefaring for barely 3 centuries. They cannot have built this fleet in 40 years. They did not build it alone. The speaker was an intelligence officer, his compound eyes scanning a data tablet. Analysis of their hull materials shows traces of crystal forging techniques. Their engine signatures match improved versions of designs. Their weapon systems appear to be based on Etherian plasma technology. He looked up. They learned from all of us. They took what each species did best and combined it. But how? Iran demanded. We them access to our technology. We refused their requests. The officer made a gesture that humans had learned meant dark amusement. You them official access, ambassador, but their merchant ships traveled through our space for 40 years. Their diplomats attended our functions. Their scientists asked our researchers endless questions. He set down his tablet. We thought they were simply curious. We thought they were trying to catch up. We never considered that they were stealing from us with every conversation. The chamber fell silent. Every species present was remembering interactions with humans over the past 4 decades. The polite questions, the humble requests, the endless patience in the face of rejection. It had all been a performance, a mask hiding the most ambitious intelligence operation in galactic history. The main display screen flickered. A human face appeared, a woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Her uniform bore more medals than any conquered officer had ever earned. "This is Grand Admiral Wei," she said. "I am addressing the Galactic Conquered directly. In approximately 2 hours, the Terran Dominion Navy will engage forces in the periphery sector. We will be passing through conquered territory to reach the combat zone." Oran found his voice. "Grand Admiral, the Conquered Council demands an explanation for this deception. You have violated every treaty, every agreement." "We violated nothing." Wei's expression did not change. "Humanity signed treaties governing our official military forces, 18 destroyers and 43 frigates, as this fleet is not part of those official forces. It was built in unclaimed space, using resources gathered outside conquered territory. We broke no laws. We simply chose not to share everything with species that had already decided we were unworthy of respect. This is an act of aggression." "No, Ambassador. This is an act of survival." For the first time, something like emotion entered the Grand Admiral's voice. 32 billion people died in the fringe territories. Your council voted to let billions more die rather than risk your own comfort. You abandoned entire worlds to them because you calculated that their lives were worth less than your strategic convenience. She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to look directly at each council member individually. "Humanity does not make such calculations. We do not abandon the helpless. We do not sacrifice the weak to save ourselves." Her voice hardened. "They are coming for the galaxy. Your Conquered has already shown it lacks the will to stop them, so we will." The transmission ended. Ambassador Oran sat motionless as chaos erupted around him. Council members shouted at each other. Military officers demanded action. Politicians argued about treaties and violations and proper responses. But Oran was old. He had lived long enough to recognize a moment when history changed direction. The humans were not asking permission. They were not negotiating. They were simply doing what needed to be done, and the mighty Galactic Conquered, with all its ancient power and endless bureaucracy, could only watch. 2 hours later, 1 million human warships moved toward the Horde in perfect formation. Behind them, they left a galaxy that would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity. The battle of the periphery began in silence. Space has no sound, no air to carry the thunder of weapons or the screams of dying ships. But if there had been ears to hear, the noise would have shattered worlds. 900 million vessels formed a wall of black chitin and organic armor across the periphery sector. They had never faced an enemy that did not flee at the sight of their numbers. They had never encountered a force willing to meet them head-on. When human dreadnoughts appeared on their sensors, the Horde's collective intelligence felt something it had not experienced in 10,000 years. Curiosity. What kind of species would challenge the Horde directly? What manner of creatures would throw themselves against inevitable death? They decided they would find out. and then they would consume these strange new beings along with everything else. Grand Admiral Wei watched the enemy formation from the bridge of her flagship, the Terran Dreadnought Spirit of Earth. Around her, officers worked their stations with calm efficiency. No one showed fear. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. "All fleets report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer announced. Wei nodded. "Begin assault pattern Omega. All units engage at will." Human tactics, everything the conquered had developed over 60,000 years of military history. The elder species believed in measured advances, in careful positioning, in conserving forces for prolonged campaigns. Their doctrine emphasized efficiency, maximum damage with minimum cost. Humanity had different ideas. The first wave of human ships did not form defensive lines. They did not hold back reserves. 100,000 dreadnoughts accelerated directly into the heart of the formation, weapons firing continuously. They attacked in fluid, overlapping patterns, each ship operating with independent judgment while coordinating through quantum-encrypted networks that the enemy could not intercept or jam. They responded with overwhelming force. Tens of thousands of their vessels swarmed the advancing human ships, unleashing biological weapons that could dissolve metal and plasma bursts that could melt stone. They expected the humans to fall back, to regroup, to calculate their losses and retreat. The humans did not retreat. Dreadnoughts that took critical damage continued fighting until their reactors failed. Ships that lost main weapons switched to ramming attacks. Crews whose vessels were crippled beyond repair aimed for enemy command clusters and triggered self-destruct sequences. The carrier Thermopylae was among the first to demonstrate what human commanders called final option tactics. When boarding parties breached her hull and enemy weapons knocked out her main power, Captain James faced a choice. He could order an evacuation and save perhaps half his crew, or he could do something else. He ordered emergency acceleration. The Thermopylae's damaged engines pushed the massive ship forward at maximum thrust, directly into the center of a command formation. 2,000 human crew members rode their dying vessel into the heart of the enemy. The resulting explosion, a combination of reactor overload and ammunition detonation, destroyed 400 ships in a single moment. Its last transmission was recorded by every human vessel in the fleet. "Tell my wife I kept my promise. We held the line." The battle continued. Human weapons proved more devastating than even conquered analysts had predicted. Plasma torpedoes modified with Etherian technology cracked vessels like eggs. Kinetic accelerators, massive that fired tungsten rods at 12% of punch through organic armor that had resisted every weapon the galaxy had thrown at it. Point defense systems created walls of fire so dense that boarding pods evaporated before reaching hull distance. But it was not human weapons that broke the horde, it was human will. They had conquered 11 civilizations. Every single one had followed the same pattern. They fought until losses reached 5%, then retreated. At 10% losses, they negotiated. At 15%, they surrendered. No species had ever been willing to pay a higher price for victory. After the first day of battle, human losses stood at 8%. The fleet did not retreat. After the second day, losses reached 14%. The fleet did not negotiate. After the third day, losses climbed to 23%. The fleet did not slow its attack. The collective intelligence had no framework for this behavior. Its calculations kept returning errors. How could any species continue fighting when nearly a quarter of their forces had been destroyed? How could any creatures value victory more than their own survival? On the fourth day, 3 human ships became separated from the main fleet. The dreadnought Stalingrad, Masada, and Drift found themselves surrounded by forces in a region of space far from any support. Their commanders faced certain death. They did not run. For 19 hours, 3 ships held a defensive position against continuous assault. They protected an evacuation corridor, a single route through which civilian ships were fleeing the combat zone. No one had ordered them to hold that position. No command had demanded their sacrifice. They simply saw people in danger and decided that their lives were an acceptable price to pay. When reinforcements finally arrived, the Stalingrad and Masada had been destroyed. The drift was burning, her hull breached in 100 places, but her weapons still firing. 300 crew members out of an original complement of 4,000 had survived. Those 300 had saved 11 million civilian lives. By the fifth day, the collective intelligence had begun to experience something unprecedented in its long existence: doubt. The humans kept coming. They did not stop. They did not slow. Every ship lost was replaced by another pressing forward. Every fallen crew was avenged by their brothers and sisters in arms. The Horde had consumed 11 civilizations by being willing to pay any price for victory. Now they faced a species that made the same calculation and meant it. On the sixth day, the Central Intelligence made a decision it had never made before in 10,000 years of expansion. It ordered a retreat. The Horde pulled back from the periphery sector. 900 million vessels, now reduced to 600 million, turned and fled toward the galactic rim. They left behind the broken remains of their command clusters and the hulls of their destroyed ships. Grand Admiral Wei watched them go from her bridge. Around her, officers wept openly. Some cheered. Others simply sat in silence, too exhausted and grief-stricken to respond. Humanity had won. The price had been terrible: nearly 30% of the fleet destroyed, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, but they had won. Wei activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "All units cease fire. The enemy is retreating." She paused. "Today we showed the galaxy what humanity can do. Today we honored every person who died in the fringe territories. Today we proved that we will never abandon the innocent, never surrender to evil, never stop fighting for what is right." She looked at the stars through her bridge windows, stars that had watched the greatest battle in galactic history. "Today," she said quietly, "we became something the universe will never forget." 3 months after the Battle of the Periphery, the Galactic Concord convened its first full session since the war's end. The Great Council Chamber looked the same as it always had: crystal walls, ancient stone floors, 12 seats arranged in a circle beneath a dome that displayed the stars. But everything had changed. The elder species took their places with unusual silence. There was none of the casual confidence that had marked their gatherings for 60,000 years. The delegation kept their scales carefully neutral. They sat motionless, their metal bodies humming with tension. The warriors, who had once laughed at the idea of humans mattering in galactic affairs, now watched the chamber entrance with something very close to fear. The human delegation arrived precisely on time. Admiral Helena led them. She had been promoted since the battle. Her role in coordinating the fleet's intelligence operations had been revealed, and Earth's government wanted the galaxy to see one of their heroes. Behind her walked officers, diplomats, and scientists. All of them moved with the quiet confidence of people who knew exactly what they had accomplished. Ambassador Oran stood to greet them. Protocol demanded it. "Admiral," he said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome humanity to this session. Your usual seat has been prepared." He gestured toward the small chair at the chamber's edge, the single seat that had been assigned to humanity 40 years ago. The minimum position. The place reserved for species that did not matter. Looked at the chair for a long moment, then she smiled. "Thank you, Ambassador, but I prefer to stand." She walked to the center of the chamber where speakers traditionally addressed the full council. No one moved to stop her. No one said a word. "The Galactic Concord has governed this region of space for 60,000 years, began. Her voice filled the chamber without effort. "During that time, you have built great civilizations. You have achieved wonders of science and art. You have maintained peace among yourselves through careful diplomacy and mutual respect." She paused, letting her gaze move across each delegation. "But 3 months ago, when the came, you failed. 32 billion innocent beings died in the fringe territories while this council debated whether saving them was worth the cost. You calculated lives like numbers on a balance sheet and decided that some people were acceptable losses." Oran's scales flushed with anger. "The situation was complex. We faced difficult choices." "You faced a choice between doing what was right and doing what was easy." His voice hardened. "You chose easy. Humanity chose different." She reached into her uniform jacket and a small data crystal. With careful ceremony, she placed it on the speaking platform at the chamber's center. This crystal contains records of every session where humanity requested assistance from the conquered, every request for technology sharing, every request for military cooperation, every request for equal treatment. She stepped back. It also contains records of every denial, every dismissal, every polite explanation of why humans were not ready, not advanced enough, not worthy of respect. The chamber was completely silent. "You measured us by your standards and found us lacking. You were correct. We do not meet your standards." Its expression remained calm, but her eyes held something fierce. "We exceed them." The representative spoke for the first time. "Admiral, what exactly are you proposing? If humanity seeks greater representation in the conquered, we can discuss." "Humanity does not seek greater representation in the conquered." Cut him off without raising her voice. "The Terran Dominion has no interest in joining your alliance as a junior member or any other kind of member. We watched you abandon billions of people to die. We watched you calculate the value of lives and decide some were worth saving and others were not. We want no part of an organization that operates on such principles." Shocked murmurs rippled through the delegations. "Then what do you want?" Oran demanded. "We want nothing from you. We are here to inform you of the new reality," clasped her hands behind her back. "The Terran Dominion is prepared to establish a new alliance, one built on genuine cooperation and mutual respect, one where no species is dismissed because they are young or different, one where the protection of innocent life is not subject to cost-benefit analysis." She looked directly at Oran. "Those species who wish to participate in this new alliance may contact our embassy. Those who prefer to continue as they have are free to do so. We will not force anyone to change." The military commander made a sound of disbelief. "You cannot simply create a new galactic order. The conquered has existed for 60,000 years. Our treaties, our trade agreements, our territorial boundaries were established when you were the dominant power in this region," finished for him. "That is no longer the case." She touched a control on her wrist device. The dome above them flickered, and the star display changed to show something new, a real-time feed from human sensor networks. The assembled delegates saw the Terran Navy. Not the million ships that had fought the what remained of those forces were undergoing repairs and recovery. This was something else. Row upon row of new dreadnoughts, fresh from the shipyards of the void. Construction platforms building still more. Supply lines stretching across vast distances. "Our shipyards have resumed full production," said calmly. "Current active fleet strength stands at 1.3 million vessels. Another 800,000 are in various stages of construction. We estimate full completion within 18 months. The numbers hung in the air, impossible and undeniable. "In case anyone was wondering about the balance of power," added with the smallest of smiles. The session continued for hours after that. Council members argued, negotiated, threatened, and pleaded. Some demanded that humanity share their technology. Others insisted on reparations for the deception of the hidden fleet. A few tried to form coalitions against the upstart humans. None of it mattered. Humanity held the largest military force in the known galaxy. They had broken the horde, something no other species had ever accomplished. And they had made clear that they operated by their own rules now, not the ancient traditions of the conquered. When the session finally ended, Ambassador Oran remained in his seat. Around him, other delegates hurried away to send urgent messages to but the old ambassador stayed still, thinking. He remembered the first time he had seen humans, small, fragile creatures with short and primitive technology. He remembered how he had dismissed them, how everyone had dismissed them as a curiosity species, suitable for labor contracts and little else. He thought about the 40 years that followed, all those polite smiles and humble requests, all those merchant ships passing through conquered space, all those scientists asking tedious questions. He had interpreted it as acceptance, as a young species learning its place in the galaxy. He had been completely, utterly wrong. Humans had never accepted their place. They had simply hidden their true nature until they were ready to reveal it. Every dismissal had taught them something. Every rejection had made them stronger. Every time the conquered had said, "You are not worthy," humanity had quietly replied, "We will show you." And now they had. Oran looked up at the crystal dome, which had returned to showing the natural stars. Somewhere out there, human warships stood guard over a region of space that had once belonged to the conquered. Somewhere out there, human diplomats were already reaching out to species that had grown tired of the elder race's condescension. The galaxy that Oran had known for 300 years was ending. The great powers that had ruled for 60 were fading into history. A new era was beginning, one shaped by creatures that had been mocked as weak, dismissed as primitive, and underestimated by everyone. The ambassador rose slowly from his ancient seat. He had much to consider. The humans had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Those who are despised today may rule tomorrow. Those who are mocked may one day stand triumphant. And those who are called weak may simply be waiting for the right moment to show their true strength. Humanity had waited 40 years. Their moment had come, and the galaxy would never be the same again.